Coming up, Russian President Vladimir Putin warns South Korea that Seoul-Moscow ties will be destroyed if Seoul provides lethal weapons to Ukraine. He claims Seoul has decided to do so. South Korea has so far provided non-lethal equipment such as helmets and medical supplies to Ukraine. The Pentagon has released its nuclear posture review, and it reads that any attack by North Korea using nuclear weapons would spell the end of the Kim Jong-un regime. Plus, South Korean President Yoon has chaired an emergency economic meeting which was aired completely live to the public. What was discussed and what it meant? We break it down. Good morning. Welcome to Noonday at Arirang. Our top story this morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned South Korea that any decision to provide weapon support to Ukraine will negatively impact bilateral relations with Moscow. So far, Seoul has only provided non-lethal supplies to Ukraine with no indication that this stance is set to change. Kim Yo-sun starts us off this morning.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has reportedly warned South Korea that Seoul-Moscow ties will be destroyed if Korea provides weapon support to Ukraine. According to Russia's state-run news agency Sputnik, the remarks were made while Putin was addressing the Valdai Discussion Club, a gathering of Russian specialists, on Thursday. The Russian leader also said that Seoul has decided to send weapons and munitions to Ukraine. So far, the Korean government has provided non-lethal military supplies to Ukraine, such as bulletproof helmets, blankets, as well as medical items. Seoul's defense ministry explained earlier there are, quote, limits with regard to offering lethal arms to Ukraine. It is not usual for the Russian leader to send a direct warning to South Korea, but it came as Putin criticized the U.S. for turning course in its denuclearization negotiations with North Korea by imposing sanctions against the regime when it seemed a deal could be struck. Also on Thursday, the Russian leader explained that the world faces the most dangerous decade since World War II. He warned that the world is facing a series of global conflicts, but a new world order is being formed right now. This new order, he said, needs to be reflected in the UN Security Council's composition. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The United States Wednesday released its 2022 National Defense Strategy. The document includes Washington's nuclear policies and posture amid growing threats around the world. Song Yu-jin has the details.
With concerns over the possibility of North Korea going ahead with its seventh nuclear test, the United States released its latest National Defense Strategy report on Wednesday local time. Released by the Department of Defense, the report outlines the country's security priorities with the Nuclear Posture Review and the Missile Defense Review. The Nuclear Posture Review describes Washington's nuclear strategy, policy, posture, and military capabilities with the goal of acting as a safe, secure, and effective deterrent. The document sent a stern warning to Pyongyang. Though it didn't recognize the North as a rival on the same scale as China and Russia, the report evaluated the regime as a persistent, growing threat to the U.S. and the Indo-Pacific region with its expanding, diversifying, and improving nuclear capabilities. It then warned that any nuclear attack by North Korea against the U.S., its allies, and partners will result in the, quote, end of that regime. And to dampen the risk of a nuclear conflict, the report reaffirmed a cooperative approach, such as building on already existing deterrence dialogues. The U.S. could periodically hold trilateral senior-level talks with South Korea, Japan, or a quadrilateral one with Australia added. In terms of Washington's policy toward the North, the U.S. is seemingly taking a carrot-and-stick approach. It will approach Pyongyang in a calibrated diplomatic way, but at the same time will continue to press the regime to comply with United Nations Security Council resolutions and return to denuclearization talks. The UNSC resolutions ban North Korea from testing or launching ballistic missiles. The report also mentioned China and Russia as posing greater nuclear threats and, in response, will come up with tailored, country-specific approaches. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
President Yoon chaired his regular economic affairs meeting. But the 80-minute-long session proved to be a departure from previous ones that were held behind closed doors for the most part. Moon Gun-young has the details.
Nearly 24 South Korean ministers and top presidential office aides in an open roundtable with the president on live television, actively exchanging policy ideas on how to breathe life into the economy. Not a scene the Korean public is used to seeing at all. And spotted in this meeting not only officials in charge of business and economy, but President Yoon's national security advisor and his defense minister. South Korea's chief executive officer kicked off the session by explaining why the unconventional approach on this Thursday.
투자와 경제 활동이 위축되는 가운데 활력을 불어넣기 위해서 정부가 어떤 정책을 가지고 있는지 또 계획을 수립해서 실천을 할지 궁금해하시는 분들이 많이 있습니다.
His finance minister set the tone of Mr. Yoon's 11th emergency meeting on economic affairs, but the first to be televised by laying out the reality.
South Korea's heavily export-dependent economy faces growing risks due to a mix of high interest rates, strengthening U.S. dollar, and skyrocketing inflation across the world. The slump in exports is expected to continue for the time being.
For the following 80 minutes, Yoon's ministers took turns proposing policy measures pertaining to their respective fields, largely in 5 areas. Betting hard on the nation's core industries, like a $700 million support for the chips industry, doubling down on defense and nuclear power plant export, and revamping overseas construction and easing financial restrictions on the housing sector, to cementing global leadership of the country's rechargeable battery manufacturers, K-contents, and the digital economy. Yoon weighed in throughout the discussion, calling for comprehensive measures on stabilizing supply chains and highlighting the close link between nuclear power plants, the defense industry, and national security.
이렇게 모든 부처가 그래서 전부 이런 국가 전략 산업을 하여튼 지원하고 촉진시킨다고 하는 이런 산업과 수출에 매진하는 이런 부서라는 생각을 가지고 우리가 일해야 되지 않겠습니까?
President Yoon, his cabinet and top aides concluded the meeting by seeing eye to eye that it is the government's job to come up with meticulous economic revitalization measures that would enable the private sector to compete on a level playing field. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News.
Now, staying with the emergency meeting, Seoul will work to help local chip makers be global leaders. The Yoon administration plans to provide other exporter industries more support to ensure Korea is one of the top 4 countries in the overseas construction industry. Also, the government seeks to ease some regulations on the local housing market. Ji-young has the details.
South Korea is shoring up one of the main drivers of its economy, the semiconductor industry. In Thursday's emergency meeting on economic affairs and people's livelihoods, President Yoon stressed that the government has been pushing to maintain South Korea's global leadership in chips despite the industry's recent difficulties. Supporting his pledge, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy cited past cases to say that the current down cycle could turn into an opportunity.
In the past, through extensive investment in the chip industry, we had great results during slowdowns. The government will provide active support for the roughly 340 trillion won that private firms are planning to invest.
The government also plans to spend about $700 million to train professionals in semiconductors and to establish infrastructure, and will sharply increase tax benefits. Forming the backbone of the country's chip industry are more than 1,000 small and medium-sized companies, and so to support them, the government is also going to set up a fund worth $200 million.
We are aiming to become the leader of the system chip industry. To achieve this, we need to nurture small fabless firms. The government will form a consultative group on fabless and foundry called One Team Korea to help ensure the industry maintains its global competitiveness.
The government will not only focus on semiconductors, but will also boost overseas construction. The Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said that amid high global oil prices, demand for construction is rising in oil-rich countries.
We will aim to win $50 billion of overseas deals per year and become one of the top 4 countries in construction. Currently, Saudi Arabia is placing orders. These include $500 billion in deals for the NEOM New City project, and we are going to do all we can to win these.
And along with the growth in the industry abroad, there will be further support for construction at home. The government in November is going to lift regulations that restrict construction in certain areas, and with home prices having risen out of many people's reach, lay out measures to get more homes onto the market.
Until now, partial mortgage loans were provided for those buying properties worth up to 900 million won. But this is too low considering how much prices have risen. It will be raised to 1.2 billion won.
He added for those chosen in lotteries to buy and move into units in new housing projects, the deadline by which they have to sell their old house will be extended to 2 years, considering the slowdown in the property market. Also, for people who own just one home or are trying to buy their first one, they'll be able to borrow up to 50% of the assessed value of the home, up from the current 40%, even in areas highly regulated because of speculation. Mortgages will also be allowed for houses worth up to 1.5 billion won, or about $1 million. 엄지영, Arirang News.
The U.S. economy has rebounded in the third quarter of the year, according to a report by the Bureau of Economic Analysis on Thursday. America's GDP rose 2.6% in the third quarter, surpassing expectations. This was the first period of positive growth recorded in 2022. A narrowing trade deficit, as well as an increase in consumer spending, were the major drivers behind the GDP growth. Pundits, however, forecast that such growth is unlikely to be sustained, adding that exports will soon fade and domestic demand is diminishing amid higher interest rates. The European Central Bank has announced a second straight 75 basis point interest rate hike on Thursday, raising the interest rate in the region to 2%. ECB President Christine Lagarde stressed the need to change terms for cheap loans to commercial banks in an effort to shrink the bloc's bloated balance sheet and fight off a historic surge in inflation as being behind the move. She also said that economic activity in the Eurozone was likely to have seen a significant slowdown in quarter 3 of 2022, a trend that is expected to continue for the remainder of the year and into 2023. 300 victims of Jeju April 3 incident, a bloody suppression of a civilian protest in 1948, and 49 are to receive compensation from the Korean government. A total of nearly $18 million will be provided for this round. Individuals will get up to $63,000 depending on the level of injury. This also marks the first time that victims of state violence are compensated. Last year, the government decided to pay about $674 million to over 10,000 people, the largest state compensation for civilian victims of past tragedies. This weekend, around the world, people will celebrate Halloween, and South Korea is no exception. Recently, more and more people in the country have been dressing up and hitting the streets to celebrate this tradition that traces its roots back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. So to discuss more about Halloween in South Korea, we have Professor of Cultural Anthropology, Christian Park from Hanyang University, Erica campus. Good morning.
Good morning.
How did Halloween celebrations evolve over the years in general around the world, and what is it that appealed to South Koreans so much that it has become so popular in the country?
Well, as you said, it's a pagan religious festival or practice, and then now in the global Halloween practice, basically secularized. So it's a part of popular culture or global culture, I think. So I think that made it more popular in South Korea. That many South Korean young people are used to Hollywood movies, Marvel comic movies, DC movies. So they were dressing up, coming out, and spending good time in the weekend, right?
Right, and is there anything about how South Korea celebrates Halloween that is different from how things are done in the West?
Well, I think Halloween is the biggest Halloween festival scene is United States, obviously. And I remember first kind of participating. Well, not myself, but bringing my young siblings into the street and getting the candies. And that basically is that from kind of focused on children, and it's the parents taking the children out and collecting the candies and just surveying the neighborhood. So it's pretty much a neighborhood practice or festival event. But in South Korea, as you can see in the screen, it's mostly 20s and 30s, young people. Parents, older generations, it's just, it's too much noise, or they may complain about it. But, and thing is, this is focused in urban areas and hotspots, Hongdae or Itaewon, right? And also it's more about international. So we have travelers or foreigners joining in and having a good time. So that's different. It's not a pan-social event, but gearing toward a specific age group, you could say.
Right, and as you saw on the screens from last year, we saw Squid Game costumes among the most popular of the costumes. Do you have any predictions for what may become Halloween 2022's most worn costume?
Well, I'm not good at this predicting, but I think I wish Squid Game would come back because, you have a classics. You got vampires, you got Marvel comics, and these more from the movies. So I think Squid Game has more rights also to come back and become a classic. So hopefully it will come back. But if you look at it, mostly it has to do with kind of the dead or ghost thing. So that's a very traditional theme related to Halloween. But Squid Game is much more recent, more popular and linking with TV drama. So it's a long way to go in a sense. But hopefully it will come back and it become a classic. And or you get maybe a new Marvel comic heroes coming, or South Koreans, young people are more going back to the classics as a zombies or Mira or a werewolf or these things. Basically gives us something kind of connection to the past, but also a time for escape. And hopefully that's what we will see this weekend.
That's right. I mean, the popularity of Squid Game is going to be tough to beat for any Halloweens to come. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day, Professor.
Yes, you too. Have a good weekend.
You too. For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyeon.
Let's start in Italy, where one person has been killed and several injured in a stabbing attack.
Well, that's right. The attack took place at an Italian supermarket in Milan's Assago suburb on Thursday night local time. Now, the attacker reportedly grabbed a knife from a supermarket shelf and stabbed 5 people at random, leaving 1 dead and seriously wounding 3 others. According to reports, the person killed was a 30-year-old supermarket cashier. Now, while the motive for the attack is still unknown, the police said the suspect showed signs of mental health problems. Among the wounded is Arsenal football player Pablo Mari, who sustained a non-life-threatening wound to the back. The centre-back is currently on loan at a local club, AC Monza. Now, Poland on Thursday demolished 4 Soviet-era statues commemorating the Soviet Red Army. The move comes as Poland looks to remove symbols of Moscow's post-World War II control and show its opposition to Russia's current war in Ukraine. The concrete statues were constructed by the former USSR and were dedicated to Russian troops who died fighting Nazi German forces. Poland's head of Institute of National Remembrance says these statues symbolize a system that enslaved and murdered its own people and other nations. He also says such monuments inspire Russia's leaders waging war in Ukraine today. Now, in a move toward gender equality in Indian cricket, women cricketers in the country will get the same appearance pay as men. The Board of Control for Cricket in India said on Thursday that the equal pay will apply to all international games across all cricket formats. Following the change, women cricket players will get about $18,000 for test appearances, $7,000 for one-day internationals, and $3,600 for T20 internationals. Now, while the match appearance pay has changed, the BCCI did not say whether it would change the annual retainer contract system. Currently, India's male cricketers get much higher pay in their retainer contracts than their female counterparts. And finally, in a world first, a person has swum across the Red Sea. British endurance swimmer Lewis Pugh completed the 123-kilometer swim on Wednesday. He did it to raise awareness of the dangers that the Red Sea's coral reefs face as a result of worsening climate change. The UN patron of the oceans took 16 days to swim from Tiran Island in Saudi Arabia to the Egyptian city of Hurghada. While in Egypt, Pugh will attend the COP27 climate summit, which takes place from November 6th for 12 days in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Good morning. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with the latest weather updates. Many of inland regions are having a foggy start to the day, so please drive with care. Meanwhile, the East Coast is covered with wet clouds dropping on and off rain there due to easterly winds. Now, 5 to 20 millimeters of showers are in the forecast. Expect to see on and off rain through Saturday morning. The rest of the country will be seeing more clouds than sunshine today. Single-digit morning temperatures will jump to the 20s, so that's going to lead to wide gaps between lows and highs in most parts, easily surpassing 10 degrees Celsius. Then afternoon temperatures will be similar to yesterday's, Seoul and Daegu topping out at 20 degrees Celsius, Daejeon, Jeju at 21 degrees this afternoon. And air quality will be normal to good nationwide once again. Now, typical late autumn weather dominates most areas through the first week of November, though dry weather and a lack of rain have pushed the wildfire season well into fall. So when you go hiking to enjoy the autumn colors, please be extra careful. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for our Monday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.